there everybody, it's Mark Crowley. I'm back with another video. Today I'm going to be having a look back on all of my different comic book projects from when I first got published back in 1995. So 25 years now that I've been making comics, and I thought that I could sort of share with you what I learned from each project, sort of distilling down one lesson that I learned from each one of the projects that I did. Now, just so you'll know what I'm working on here, this is artwork for my sequel to the drawing lesson, which I'll be showing the original drawing lesson in a minute. But that's what I'm working on as I get this video done today. Let's go ahead and jump into the first piece of advice here, or the lesson that I learned. Number one, sometimes it's okay to make the whole story up as you go along. Now, this piece of advice comes from the beast that ate Morioka. Really the first big complete comic book story I ever made, although it wasn't published until a little later. But I'll sort of open it up and show you some of the artwork from the interior of this. I did this actually even before 1995, back when I was an English teacher in Japan. And yeah, my piece of advice that the lesson that I learned is that sometimes you can just make the story up as you go along. You know, if you're one of these people who wants to do comics, but you're like, I haven't, got so many story writing skills, just go ahead and jump in, with a few characters, throw them into a situation. That's how I got started. I had almost no idea where this story was going to go. The Beast That Ate Morioka. I came up with the idea of a sort of inventor boy who just by sheer chance combines the chemicals in a certain way, and boom, creates this monster. And then the monster eats things and gets bigger and bigger. And beyond that, I really had no idea where that story was going to go. And, when you're a beginner especially, that's not a bad way to go. There's a sort of a feeling of whimsy, spontaneity, and before you know it, at least in my case, I found that I was taking the whole process more and more seriously as I went. And by the time I was done with that first story, I was ready to, create something more easily publishable. And that is going to bring us to the next project and the next sort of lesson that I learned from it. Why don't I show the project first this time, and that is Akiko. This was my first big breakthrough. Got published back in 1995, launching this series about this little girl, Akiko, who goes to the planet Smoo and has a series of adventures with these characters. And let me just go ahead and name these characters. This is Mr. Biba. This is Spuckler. This is Gax, Spuckler's robot, and this is Poog, the mysterious floating head alien character. And indeed, the lesson that I want to share is this one. For many readers, it's all about the characters. Better to have memorable characters in a forgettable story than the other way around. Well, of course, you want both of them to be memorable, ideally, but I guess that's just my way of saying, don't forget to give your story interesting, memorable characters, because for some readers that is really the main thing that they're interested in. And in a way, if you can create characters that your readers fall in love with, your readers will go with you down almost any story path you care to explore. Because they like those characters, they like spending time with those characters. And certainly for me, the Akiko story characters, that was sort of a pivotal first step for me. That it allowed me to do a whole series of comics, and in a way that one stands out among all the other comics I've done in terms of sheer number of pages and variety of stories that I told using those characters. I did 53 different issues of the comic, and I can't really tell you how many stories, but there were at least 5 or 6 different stories that I created with those characters, and it really did allow me to spread my wings and establish myself as a comic book creator, and it all in a way stemmed from those characters, because I managed to create characters that the readers loved. And arguably, I don't know if I ever created such fully memorable characters again after that. It was like I had this really big burst of character creation, and part of it was that it was such a the story was so imaginative. It allowed me to do really highly unusual characters, whereas the stories I've done since then have by and large been a little more based in the real world. In any case, let's continue on to the next one, and I will just go ahead and show those of you who've been watching my videos. You're going to remember Minky Falls. This is the project that I was working on when I first started doing YouTube videos. What is it, 13, 14 years ago? I can't even remember. Indeed, I have a little piece of advice to share based on this one. Number 3, if you want a really satisfying ending, you need to write an outline for the entire story. Kind of the opposite piece of advice in a way from my first piece of advice, telling you that it's okay to make it up as you go, if you want to. But if you really want a satisfying ending, if you want twists and turns along the way, you really do need to start working out your story. And I would say that's the biggest difference between my early stories and the stories that I do now, is that the early stories were just sort of made up page by page almost, or sequence by sequence. Whereas the newer stories, I always have an outline. I know what my ending is, and a lot of that is just spent, going for long walks almost and working it through. How do I get everyone to this part of the story where I can do this other thing? For me, I've just decided I'm not going to leave it all to chance, because when you do leave it all to chance, you may paint yourself into a corner, or you may get an idea halfway through and you're like, man, if only I had set this up earlier on, it wouldn't feel like I just pulled this out of nowhere, because readers don't like it when it seems like you just invented something to get your characters out of a predicament. So anyway, I certainly these days believe that coming up with an outline is important. Now, it's not a super detailed outline. It's not like a script where I've worked out every single beat in the story. You can be pretty loose, but in terms of your ending, I would say that's the big crucial thing. Readers, especially if it's a long story, they have expectations of a satisfying ending. And if you've got a great story that's great all the way through but has a dissatisfying ending, people's impression will not be good. They will tend to remember how disappointing the ending was and forget about all the great stuff that you had at the beginning and the middle. So anyway, if you've never done a story that had an outline, give it a try. I certainly feel it's helped to me. Let's move on to my next one, and I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of this one, Brody's Ghost. Brody's Ghost was my next big story after Minky Falls. Minky Falls was actually longer in terms of page count, but Brody's Ghost got put together into a single book, which sort of revealed it's something like 550 pages. I can't remember exactly. Big epic story, and of course I definitely planned that one out. Let's go ahead and go to the lesson that I learned from this one. Give your main character an emotional journey, not just a series of problems to solve. So with Brody, we've got this guy. I guess I can show him at the beginning of the story. When we first meet him, he lives in this dumpy little apartment, and the main thing we know about him is that he's messy, And so I've given him this sort of journey to go on, and especially with this ex-girlfriend that he had. I wonder if I can find that real quick. He has, he's talking to his friend Gabe about this girlfriend that he broke up with. And this was all about giving him an emotional journey, making him pretty depressed, a guy who had kind of given up on life at the beginning of the story. And then we got somewhere to go with him emotionally. He's not just a guy who's dealing with lots of problems that need to be fixed, and fight scenes and all this stuff. Give him some sort of a journey to go on emotionally. And then the story works on the two different levels of the sort of physical things that are happening, and then the sort of emotional and mental transformation, I would say, is key of the main character. And in a lot of ways, Brody's Ghost is all about a loser type of character who transforms himself into, not necessarily a winner, but just a better person. And he undergoes, the sort of training that you see in a lot of action-oriented stories. But in this case, it has more, it's not just about becoming some kind of really cool fighting guy, but about lifting himself up out of this depression that he's been in. So yeah, that was certainly a piece of advice that I could share with you from that story. If you've got a story that, you've come up with a really cool idea and lots of interesting scenes and problems, action stuff for them to deal with over the course of the story, that's great. But step back and think about the emotional journey of your character. Most stories, most movies, TV shows, what have you, you will see that there are the two elements. And that emotional journey is arguably even more important than the sort of, as I said, physical stuff. Now we move on to my second to most recent project, The Drawing Lesson, a graphic novel that teaches you how to draw. Now it is indeed a sort of an instructional book. We see this boy who's learning how to draw. We see the teacher showing, there's these scenes of like the pencil and showing technique. But it is in fact a story. And there's a lot of stuff where you get to know the characters and you get to know the personalities of the characters. And so I count this for sure among my projects in terms of comic books, graphic novel projects. And the lesson I would say that I learned from this one is there's nothing wrong with cartoony artwork. Indeed, some readers prefer it to highly realistic styles. In a way, you could trace my progress from Akiko through Miki Falls and Brody's Ghost to making increasingly realistic-looking artwork in terms of the anatomy and so forth. And I think by the time I got to the end of Brody's Ghost, I was ready to sort of circle back and return to my roots in a way. And that's why The Drawing Lesson was the first time I'd done a sort of cartoony-looking character in quite a long time. And I wonder if I can find, look at his facial expression here, right? Cartoony drawing techniques allow you to do these exaggerated facial expressions. And people respond to this in an interesting way. Arguably more than they do to like sort of photoreal looking styles. And so if you, this is certainly a word of encouragement to those of you who are not, feel that you're not so good at making realistic drawings. And you might say to yourself, well, I'm only good at cartoons, or I'm only able to do cartoony drawing. Well, I would say, you don't have to say only there. If you're able to do cartoony drawings, that is great. And a lot of people really respond to cartoony drawings. And in a funny way, The Drawing Lesson made a bigger impression in some ways, arguably, than Brody's Ghost did. Because I think people in the mainstream of American society or global society respond to cartoony artwork sometimes beyond, in a deeper way or a more natural way than they do to this sort of more specific, semi-realistic anime type of style that I was doing in Brody's Ghost. Who knows? I don't mean to criticize Brody's Ghost, but I guess more what I'm saying is I was surprised how much people responded to the cartooniness. And, the Wall Street Journal actually did a special review of Brody's Ghost, or not Brody's Ghost, but of The Drawing Lesson. And, there were very few reviews of Brody's Ghost when it came out, to be honest. it kind of wasn't noticed in that way. So, of course, the whole project and how it taught you how to draw had a lot to do with that. But I do think, again, the cartoony approach was wise. And if I had done the drawing lesson with super realistic looking drawings, I wonder if it would have been as successful, if it would have connected with people quite as much. Well, we're coming to the very latest project, which hasn't been published yet. It's called My Last Summer with Cass, and I can't really even show it to you without splicing in graphics from the story. As I said, the book doesn't come out until next March, so I can't show you that book. I wish I could. But I can show you some interior art from that book, a little sneak peek. So let's go ahead and have a little look at artwork, sneak peek artwork from My Last Summer with Cass. So there you see the artwork from My Last Summer with Cass coming out in March. Here's my little lesson that I would share based on that one. It's not a bad thing to feel out of your element as a creator. It means you've stopped repeating yourself and are instead trying something new. I'll be honest with you guys, I got about halfway into working on this project, My Last Summer with Cass, and there were times when I really felt a little bit lost, and sort of like, is this good? I mean, are people going to like this? I don't know, And it was a weird experience for me because normally I'm pretty confident of what I'm doing and at least feel, yeah, this is good stuff. People are going to like this. But boy, I got into the middle of this latest project, and it wasn't exactly creative block, but it certainly was almost like a crisis of faith in the project itself. And at first it was very troubling, but then I realized actually that it came from the fact that I was doing something new. This project, My Last Summer with Cass, is pretty close, as close to autobiographical as I've ever done. I've never told a story that's based on my own life. And this one is not exactly a recording of events from my own life, but it's heavily inspired by experiences that I have had in real life. And it indeed was a new type of story for me. I had never taken on a story like that, a story that sort of deals with relationships and ideas and conflict between characters, like real conflict, not just, story tension that's been injected into the story to make things interesting. This is a story that's all about conflict between two characters. And I think really in the end I realized, hey Mark, it's good that you are feeling unsure. That means that you're trying something new. That you're not just doing the tried and true type of story that you feel very familiar with. And indeed, I think it's like David Bowie or one of those great singers who said that that's where they always want to be creatively. I always want to be a little bit unsure of what I'm doing. And that way I know that I'm not just resting on my laurels, playing it safe. So that was one thing I wanted to share, sort of a personal note. If you've ever felt that way about a story, it's like, I don't even know if this is any good, That might just be a sign that you're trying something new. You're pushing yourself into a new direction, and that's a good thing. Indeed, the opposite of that is not a good thing. You don't want to just be retreading, and if there's anything I can say about the history of my career in comics, I hope that everyone could agree. Crilly kept trying new things. I didn't just do Akiko over and over again, which is to say I didn't try to create another story about a kid going into some fantasy land with a crew of characters like I did. Every story pretty much everything I've ever done, I've always tried to almost pivot away from the thing that I did before and force myself to try something new, to do something new. So anyway, that probably is enough of my gabbing for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video and got some good advice out of there, sharing my lessons over, oh my goodness, 25 years. Has it really been 25 years? I'm afraid it has, since I started doing comics. And thank you all so much for watching this video. I guess I'll go ahead and lay down this brush. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. And I'll be back with another one real soon.